Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just checking that I'm live. Okay, so I will just check. Sometimes there's a bit of a time delay between going live and actually appearing live. So anyway, I shall just get started. So thanks for joining. If you're watching on the replay, then welcome. Today I'm going to be talking all about getting focused. And in fact, I am doing a series of lives all this week, 12 o'clock each day, Monday through to Friday. And I thought that it would be great to just start the new year, start 2023 with thinking a little bit more about how you can get focused and how you can really start the year as you go on. Now, that can be for whether you're looking for a new job or whether you're just actually thinking you need to do a little bit more focus on your career, even if you're staying in a role that you have right now. Because I know that not everyone is looking to leap from a steady or stable job right now, given the whole situation with the economy, but there will be things that you can do to make sure that you're planning ahead for the future. So today is all about getting focused. Tomorrow we will look at exploring your talents, really starting to get an understanding of what you're good at. On Wednesday, day 3, we'll be looking at creating a plan. You might want to have a short-term plan, medium-term, long-term planning, but I'll talk you through how you can get a bit more organized and get some structure. Day 4, we'll be looking at CVs and how to make your CV shine, getting ahead again and getting up to date, ready for when you might need it. And finally, on Friday, we will talk all about confidence. And one of the key things I find with my coaching clients is that confidence is absolutely key to getting going. So that's what we've got planned this week. Whether you're watching live or on the replay, do put a comment in and let me know what you think. And if there's any questions that you've got, do just put them in the chat. So let's start with getting focused. And one of the things I think I see a lot of is when people think, oh, I'd like to start getting a job, or perhaps you've been made redundant, or there's something afoot in the office and you think, well, I ought to go and start looking. What a lot of people do is start at the very, in my mind, the end of the process, which they start on LinkedIn or Indeed, and they start putting in the search for a job. Now, if you were thinking, well, let's think about if you were going to go on holiday, you wouldn't just turn up at the airport and go and start looking at different flights on different boards and then just pick one, because you'd be a bit overwhelmed if you're standing there at the boards or the train station looking at everywhere that you could go. There's lots and lots of possibilities. And actually, it's the same with a job. We need to start to think first and foremost about what it is we want. Where do we want to be going? So if we were thinking about a train trip, we'd want to be thinking about where do we want to go? How long do we want to be traveling for? What's the sort of vibe of the place when we get there? You know, what sort of destination do we want? Do we want something that's kind of, you know, cultural, quiet, historic, lots of, you know, interest? Or do we want, you know, party vibe, clubs and bars? And this is where we need to think about what sort of company it is that we want to be looking at. So what I advocate is absolutely planning in advance and planning ahead in the same way that you would with a trip. And one of the first things we need to do is then start to think about why it is we're looking. Now, it might be you sitting there thinking, well, I've been made redundant. That's why I'm looking. I loved the job I was in. And that's absolutely fine and understandable that you'd be thinking that if that's what you want to be looking at the same thing. One of the things that we can look at is start to really think about where we are at personally. Now, I remember thinking different things about how I thought about my career throughout my 30 years or so now that I've been working. Early on, I was very driven, very money focused, very promotion focused, happy to do any overtime, work Saturdays, just get stuck in. If I was asked to do anything at all, can you take on this extra piece of work? Can you take on this team? I would say, yep, absolutely fine. My husband was also doing something quite similar. And so we would both be very driven. If I worked an evening, it didn't really matter because he was probably working the evening too. Then things changed. We had children. And then that whole kind of, do I want to go back to work after maternity kicked in? I was thinking, well, maybe I won't go back to work. When my eldest was born, I decided that I did want to go back to work, but I went back to work slightly differently in a different role, part-time. And then as the kids got older, I had that desire to do different things and be more back in that sort of promotion world. But if anyone has heard and seen some of my stuff online before, you might know that when my son was born, he had a potential meningitis scare. And at the time, I was 90 minutes away from the nursery. And I had such a long drive to get to him and think, God, how am I going to get there? And I made a decision there and then to change my job and to come to a job that was much closer to home. I took quite a pay cut, a couple of grades drop as well. And at the time, though, that was what I needed. And then luckily, the sort of place that I'd found meant that I could then go back on the promotion journey. I've had other bouts of ill health as well, stress, migraines, burnout. And again, this has meant at certain times what I want out of a job, what I want out of a career has become quite different. So I wonder where you are at right now. Are you in a position where you are looking for something for a particular reason? It could be, that you want more hybrid type working and your current employer isn't offering the work-life balance that you want. It could be that you want more flexibility in your role, more balance, work-life balance isn't quite right for you. There could be the money, the promotion. If you find that you're in like a dead end type job or it's dead man's shoes, then it can be really hard. If you're ambitious and you're striving and you want more money, and every time you get a knockback of, well, you can't do anything right now, or there's no business case, or there's only a limited number of slots for you, then again, that might be one of the reasons why you're looking to move. And of course, with money pressures as they are right now, with the cost of living rising, actually a lot of people will be thinking about money and either saving money, so cutting down on things like a commute or expenses that you don't need to spend. So if you're working at home, you potentially don't need to spend as much on the commuting, the petrol, the coffees in Pret. On the other hand, the electricity and the gas and the heating bills might suddenly start to rise. So you might now be thinking, oh, well, I'd like to be out a little bit more. So thinking about those might be reasons. I mentioned stress and health and burnout, and there are a lot of people that I'm working with right now who are really struggling. And there's a lot of people who are off sick. And if you're not off sick, but you're in the business trying to cope with the gaps caused by sickness, then that can mean that you are put under much bigger burden and much bigger stress. So again, really start to think about what it is for you that is the driver for this change. Another big one is culture. And, often we think, oh, I'd like to go to a company culture that is great for me. When you try and define what that culture is, it can be quite hard. But most of the time we know what bad culture feels like, because we just know that we're not really in alignment. If you've got a bad boss, someone who's taking credit for everything that you do, maybe they're not sponsoring you, maybe there's bullying, harassment, outright sexism, racism. Unfortunately, that is still a topic that comes up in my coaching discussions, unbelievably, in 2022, 2023. We know that a culture can feel really draining and it can make people ill. If you're being asked to work more hours than you are prepared to give or you can give, if you're being made to feel guilty every time. I remember a lady talking to me about the fact that she worked a certain number of hours and she had part-time contract, and yet her boss insisted on putting in calls every Friday or every day at 4 o'clock when she was supposed to be logging off. And it was almost like a bit of a test of your commitment or your diligence, or I don't know what it was, some sort of ego thing. And what it did, though, was put her under extreme pressure, because she either had to say no every single time, or she had to confront him with a particular conversation. But it meant that, you know, whatever route she'd gone through, she was made to feel bad. And the culture of that particular boss wasn't great for her mental health and her well-being. So culture, bosses, they could all be reasons why you're thinking, yeah, I do need to think a little bit more about where I want to be. And then there's the other sort of side of it. I mentioned when my children came along, you know, even though I was hugely ambitious and had been, you know, getting promotion and taking on more responsibility, everything did change when my kids were born, partly because I just simply didn't have the time. I wasn't able to do sort of the staying late and traveling around the country that was required of that old role. So I was looking for something that gave me a job that I could do and do well, but maybe not with all of the high flying expectations. So now, whether you're having children, have had children, or are planning to have children in the future, getting that in your mind as if that is a focus for you, thinking about in advance, actually, I would like to go and work in a company that has child-friendly policies, actually is supportive of families and work-life balance. I know of a lady who worked for a company who offered IVF leave. There are others that offer extended maternity benefits, childcare provisions, nurseries on site. Those things, if you're thinking about having children in the future, you might want to start targeting a company with those sorts of features right now. Now, not everyone has family, not everyone has kids, but there's also a whole, I think there was something I looked at recently, that something like 1.8 million of us are carers. And that also has its own challenges, because, you know, there'll be many of you who are looking after elderly relatives or other members of your family. And that also requires a level of flexibility that you might need to be able to go and visit. Or as people health deteriorates or whatever, you're going to need more time to go and make those arrangements and make plans and sort out various different caring provisions and so on. So, you know, if you're a carer or you think that that's coming up in the horizon, I think the phrase is that many of us are going to be in this sandwich generation where we have kids that are still, you know, under 20, but also elderly parents who are aging. And so we're in that scenario where we're not just looking after family members, but we're also caring for the elder generation. And that might have an impact on people's approach to work. Now, the reason for going through some of those scenarios is just to see if any of that resonates with you. Is there anything there that you think, well, yes, that would be my main focus? Once you know that that is your main focus, what it means is you can start to think about your search with that in mind. If you want family-friendly policies or a company that does hybrid working, flexible working, when you go and start doing your search, you can really make sure that that is part of your categories, because there are still loads and loads of jobs out there. If you just put in that you want to be in a certain location, Milton Keynes, for example, which is where I am, or you want a certain job title, HR manager or IT manager, then what that is going to give you is a large number potentially of types of work. But it won't necessarily give you that specificness of a culture or the hours or the location. If you don't want to do travel, you don't want to do global travel, you want to be local, then you need to start honing in your search. Now, my belief is that if you can start to really hone your search up front and make sure that you're only applying for jobs that you really want, you are going to save yourself a huge amount of time, energy, effort, emotional anxiety, because looking for a job is actually a full-time job. There is a huge amount of effort, and the more senior you are, the more effort you have to put in. I'm coaching some people at the moment who are looking for very senior roles. The processes are long, they're arduous, they require presentations, research, reading, several stages of interview. Now, you only want to go through that sort of level of effort if you really want to get that job in the first place. You don't want to be just ticking a box and saying, oh, well, I'll try because I think I should. So if you've made sure that it ticks all of those boxes in terms of your why, then you can make sure you're saving a lot of time, effort, and energy down the line. So thinking about what you want and why you want it. And it might be that it is only for now. So when I was talking about my journey, there were different ups and downs. I had time early on where I could do loads of things. When the children were very young, I wanted to do less. And then as they got older, I could do a bit more. Now I work for myself and I'm choosing to do less hours. Again, I'm making different decisions depending on health. And for me, childcare were the main reasons. So thinking about what it is you are wanting and why you want it can be making sure you get that focus. And when you get that focus, then you can start to really make sure you're only applying for companies and cultures and workplace cultures that you want. Now, if you're not really looking right now, but you think perhaps your 2023 goal was to just get a bit more focus on your career, there is nothing stopping you from doing this research up front. And later on in the week, when we start to talk about skills, creating a plan, making your CV, then all of this you can do in advance of being made redundant, or deciding that actually in a few years' time I'd like to have children, or maybe next year I'd like to have children, or I know that my parents are getting that bit older and I need to have maybe a change of location to be near them, or so on. You can make some of those plans now so that you can get ahead of the game. You can start to do your research into sort of locations you want, types of company that you like, the cultures that you're spotting that you are interested in. You can tag those on LinkedIn, follow them, and you can start to just build up your own knowledge and your own research. When people sadly get made redundant, often they will, understandably, and I've been made redundant a couple of times, there is a huge amount of shock, upset, emotion associated with redundancy. And what people do when they're being made redundant is they go into this kind of, right, I've got to find a job immediately, and they start tagging everything on LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever, and then end up being overwhelmed and apply for 200 jobs, get disappointed when they don't get shortlisted because they haven't tailored their CV, etc. My view is get ahead while you can, make your plans, think about your future, think about your time that you've got in advance. Then if the worst does happen and you do get made redundant, then at least you know that you've done this effort in advance. And as I say, later on in the week, we'll talk about CVs. A lot of people don't have their CVs dusted down and are well out of date. And if that's you, then on Wednesday we can talk about that. So I hope that's been helpful. Start to sit down and really think about what it is you want. Where are you? What's your time of life? What's your health like? Where do you want to be in the future? And then you can start to get a little bit more focused. Now, if you want to register for the rest of the week, then you can go to Eventbrite and see which of the link is on the bottom there. So you can register for the other sessions, and we've got these sessions all week. So please do join. Now, if you're interested in listening to my podcast, I've got some interviews that are being done. The next set of podcasts actually released today. And I've got the next 4 are actually with guests who've talked a bit about their career journey. And they were really fascinating conversations. People were very open and honest about their journey. And it was really interesting to see how during their careers, just like mine, going up and down and taking different turns that were unexpected, that people had made these massive pivots and changes. So do have a listen there. And if you're interested, of course, then there is the book, Get the Job You Really Want. It is available on Amazon, or if you want the colour copy, you can go to my website and order it from me direct. So I hope that's been useful. Do get in touch, let me know what you think, and I will hopefully see some of you tomorrow.